Finally, to the great, proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. Stay sheltered. Don't leave your home. It's very dangerous outside. Bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations. For many years, you have asked for America's help, but you never got it. No president was willing to do what I am willing to do tonight. Now you have a president who is giving you what you want. So let's see how you respond.
Well, that's Donald Trump speaking at the end of February, the night the US and Israel launched their attacks on Iran. But if a war is fought in the name of liberation, does it matter whether the people being liberated actually want that help? Janina Dill is a professor of global security at the Blavatsky School of Government at the University of Oxford. She's also co-director of the Oxford Institute for Ethics, Law and Armed Conflict. She just published an article in Foreign Affairs which looks at just this issue. Welcome to DW, Professor. When President Trump tells the Iranian people, we're doing this for you, I wonder how seriously you think that he thinks we, the public, take that claim, because don't we all know, or at least suspect, that such justifications are just a diplomatic fig leaf as the US furthers its real agenda?
We should take that very seriously, because the dominant position in moral philosophy is that if you use violence on behalf of someone else, you have to ask them first. And in just war theory, it is equally well established that if you fight a war on behalf of a particular group, that group should have a veto over the war. So we have every reason to take that seriously as a long-standing moral position, and a moral position we have reason to believe resonates with Americans.
Well, let's explore that then, because I'm guessing that Donald Trump hasn't read the same moral philosophy books that you have. And you talk about the people being liberated, effectively having a veto. We have seen a war being waged with a whole welter of excuses that changed at the start, almost by the minute. So let me press you on that notion of whether that was just what politicians say because they have to say it, or if you believe that Donald Trump really believed that.
So there is a pattern here. US presidents that send US forces abroad to intervene in other countries often quite casually claim that those wars benefit the people on the ground. Liberation is one of the aspects that we hear about a lot. Every war the United States wages abroad also has a strategic rationale, often the defense of the United States or the defense of an ally, or in the case of Iran, the obvious reasons relating to the nuclear program and to Israel's security. But we also have this really strong pattern that Democrat as well as Republican presidents often also claim that the people in the country where the United States uses military force benefit from that force, and then they often simply infer that therefore the war has consent. And that is problematic if the claim is gratuitous and if there is no evidence for that consent. I cannot tell you whether the president himself believes that this is important, but in the frequency with which we hear these arguments, almost around every major US war abroad, there's the argument that the people, the intervened people, the bombed people actually support that or welcome that. The frequency suggests that presidents themselves maybe share that moral intuition that if you wage war on behalf of another people, that they in principle should be supportive or have a reason, have a right to consent or not consent.
And do you believe that there is evidence that the Iranian people welcome this American intervention?
We don't have evidence one way or the other. We mustn't mistake the evidence we have for Iranian people disliking their regime and taking great pains to try to demonstrate against the regime. That is not evidence for Iranian people welcoming US and Israeli bombs. So we don't have evidence that they didn't want this intervention either. We simply don't know.
OK, so that's... I don't want to sound argumentative, but that sounds like you're backing my position that this is just something Donald Trump made up because that's what you have to say in order to build a moral argument.
Yes, in a sense, I mean, my point is that we shouldn't make such claims gratuitously because they carry moral weight. And in research that I conducted recently with colleagues, we also found that these claims resonate with the American public. The American public supports wars more if they believe the local population consents, and they support wars less if they think the local population doesn't consent. So claiming local consent gratuitously isn't just morally wrong vis-a-vis the people whose consent you claim but may not have. It also is a problem for the democratic legitimacy of the intervention in the United States, and it's potentially bad politics, because when it becomes obvious that you don't have the consent of the people that you're intervening and that the people that don't actually want US meddling, then that also erodes war support in the United States.
And of course, in a situation like we have in Iran, it's very difficult to hear, as you say, one way or the other, what the people think. But let's stick with your research with regard to how the American people view these sorts of interventions. How much is trust a factor? Will people accept the premise of a just war sold to them by leaders regarded as otherwise untrustworthy?
I mean, the extent to which the American public believes this government on any account, right, is a slightly different matter. In the first instance, we know that this is a very unpopular war, that the American people, by and large, do not support the Israeli-United States intervention in Iran. And that will have different reasons, right? We know from a long-standing body of work on American war support that costs to the American people undercut war support, prospects of success, but also the type of policy goal that an American intervention pursues. All of these shape war support. And now the research I recently conducted with colleagues suggests that it also matters to them whether the people on the ground, the population there, actually wants the war. And in this case, I don't think we have a good reason to know, or we know much about why the American public rejects this war, but it is in some sense overdetermined, because a lot of the factors we know that undercut US war support here suggest that this would be an unpopular war. We don't know whether the American public at the beginning of the intervention believed the US president that Iranians wanted liberation courtesy of American bombs. That claim was always quite implausible, but by now it is really deeply implausible, because this war has predictably caused a lot of civilian casualties, it has wrecked the Iranian economy, and if anything, it has hardened the Iranian regime's grip on power. So it hasn't, in fact, liberated the Iranian people. So given that these results were quite predictable, I think any sort of plausibility that this claim ever had that the Iranians wanted US military intervention for liberation, that plausibility would be gone by now.
I wonder if one of the many difficulties that we now face is even agreeing on the notion of a just war in a world of AI-generated, misinformative social media and ever faster news cycles. We can't even agree on truth and alternative facts. So can we agree on whether a war is just or not?
So we need to separate two different questions, right? What are the criteria for a just war? So in principle, what boxes do you have to tick for your war to be just? And I think we can actually find quite a lot of agreement here, and the study of moral psychology and just war theory that works with public opinion polling suggests that a lot of long-standing principles here actually resonate with a lot of people. So the idea, for instance, that war should be defensive, right? You shouldn't just start a war to conquer someone else's territory or to make yourself rich, but a war with a just cause is a defensive war, right? The second issue is here that war should be the lesser evil, right? So self-defense, even if you have that just cause, you should be able to, in a sort of good faith projection, know that you can achieve that cause without causing more harm than you're avoiding. These types of principles that make a war just in principle, right, they resonate with a lot of people. There's a kind of deep moral grammar to what is or is not a just war. But what you're asking about is something slightly different, right? So when we apply these principles to a specific case, do we have reliable facts and evidence about this case that we can actually make that determination? And if someone comes to us, like for instance, the leadership of Israel, and says we are under an imminent threat from Iran, right? Do we trust that they actually appropriately represent the facts of the case? And here, misinformation, AI, social media, all of that comes in to erode people's trust in the facts as they are presented to them. So I think we need to distinguish the notion of, can we agree on a moral judgment? And I think there's much more agreement than we generally think. And then the question, in a specific case, can we, in a sort of democratic public discourse, inform people to a standard that we actually have confidence that they can make a judgment about that case? And that is a much, much bigger challenge.
OK. So we've had Venezuela, we're having Iran, we haven't had Greenland for now, but before the Iran conflict took this downward turn, the White House seemed to be eyeing up Cuba. From everything that you've said, it seems that if I were to ask you whether or not that was a good idea, your answer would be no.
So again, if we had someone claim that Cubans want intervention by the United States, right, we would have to tell them quite a similar story that we need to tell them about Iran, right? So in a country that is quite repressive and closed off, we can't do reliable opinion polling, right? People have an incentive to misrepresent their preferences. So it's in a way unethical to ask them, because if they tell you the truth, they might face repression from their government. And so we shouldn't ask in the first place, so we don't have reliable polling, right? That is true about Iran, and that would be true about Cuba. So the question is, can we actually establish what the people there want, right? Oftentimes we listen to the diasporas, but that is in some sense fraught, because not only do they often not agree amongst themselves, so we knew, for instance, that the Iranian diaspora in the United States was quite divided about this issue, but also they don't represent the people in the country because they have self-selected, right, into a specific group that is now in exile. So there are other ways to try in good faith to establish what people in a country like Iran or Cuba might want. And I have to point out that by and large, US presidents don't make that good faith attempt to establish that, right? But generally speaking, the story here in Cuba would be quite similar, that we should be extremely cautious and scrutinize the claim that maybe Cubans, because they are facing a very difficult situation at home, they're stricken by poverty and they are subject to a repressive regime, we should really not then simply infer from that that they want American military intervention.
That's great. Thank you so much for guiding us through that so clearly, Professor Janina Dill from the University of Oxford.